This is the Nurses Doing GAMSAT podcast, brought to you by ThankFlip GAMSAT. We're here to teach you how to smash the GAMSAT, get into medicine, and become a flippin' great doctor.
Welcome back, everyone, to Nurses Doing GAM podcast by ThankFlip GAMSAT. I am Dr. Tom, CEO and founder of ThankFlip, and we're joined today by Shabby. Welcome, Shabby.
Thank you.
So Shabby is a fourth-year University of Notre Dame medical student. We're talking about CASPer today. If you didn't notice by the title of this podcast, but she did the CASPer herself, got the top score in the fourth quartile, and has been tutoring and coaching students on CASPer ever since. And she's here today to talk to you about all things CASPer. We're going to be talking about that today, what it is, what it's not, how to prepare for it, common pitfalls, some tips, and what we can do to help you along. So welcome, Shabby.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom, for having me. It's lovely to meet you all and lovely to be on this awesome podcast. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and so lovely to be able to be here to answer any questions and to talk about my own journey with regards to the CASPer.
Yeah, so CASPer, it's kind of a new thing in a sense, relatively speaking. It's kind of come in to a couple of the medical schools. Do you want to kind of tell us a bit about what's the big deal? Like why are we talking about CASPer today?
Yeah, of course. So you might be aware in the medical admissions journey, we have a couple of things that are required for entrance, like the GAMSAT, a GPA, and these all are numbers games and they're all academic-based sort of things. But we know when you're working as a medical student and in the allied health space and as a medical professional, there's a lot more than just what you know. It's also about the way you communicate with people. It's the way you show empathy. It's a way you connect with people. That's a big part of being a medical professional. And that's where the CASPer comes in, where a lot of unis have now started to realize that academics aren't really the most important thing when it comes to building a medical professional, whether that be a doctor or a nurse. So that's really what the CASPer is about. The CASPer is a test that is conducted online, so it can be done from home. That is basically a situational judgment test that looks at your response to various interpersonal and ethical and sort of critical thinking scenarios, and it looks at your own personal characteristics.
So that situational judgment test. To me, that it's still a vague term, right? It's like, what situation, what judgment? Can you give us some examples of what are these judgments and situations?
Of course. So it can vary. So in the CASPer, they can give you situations that are in a medical space. So you might be in a situation where you're dealing with a patient who perhaps is complaining about the way they've been treated, or a situation where someone may be getting aggressive, for example, in the medical space, and it sort of asks, how would you respond to this scenario? How would you communicate with this person? Or it could also be in a sort of academic setting. So like the scenario might be you're in university and one of the students you've noticed has been cheating in an exam. How do you respond to that? Do you tell on them, or do you have a conversation with them? What is your approach? So it generally is interpersonal scenarios where you're dealing with people, and it can be in various settings and scenarios.
Yeah, and they tend to be quite kind of awkward situations too. Like one of the ones I remember seeing from the actual Acuity website, the people that make the CASPer test, is that they show you this little video, and you're in the workplace in an office, and you go to the printer and you lift up or the photocopier, you lift it up, and you see that there's a document in there that's been falsified by the boss. And then like, what do? And you're like, you're by yourself, and then one of your colleagues walks up and says, "What's that?" And then you explain it, and all of a sudden it just got more awkward. And it's like, what do you do in that situation?
Yes.
Yeah. And another one I remember was, it's you and a friend, you're outside somewhere, and there's an elderly gentleman who's trying to cross a busy road, and he looks a little disheveled. Yeah, it's not completely dressed. And it's like, what do you do in that situation? So it's these kind of really
Bizarre.
realistic but kind of difficult situation, and how would you manage it? And I think that's what you're saying there, Shabby, is like that's what I mean, you don't have a lot of those, but the kind of when you are in one of those situations, what you do is really, really important.
For sure.
Um,
For
and
sure.
as a medical professional, you kind of need to be able to manage that, and that's one of the qualifying factors. That's a few of the medical schools have decided that's super important now.
100%. And in medicine, everything is unpredictable. You don't know who's going to walk through the doors of the hospital one day and you know what's going to happen the next day. So being prepared for this variety of situations is a really great test of how you can deal with very stressful things very quickly as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and so then so how do they use it? Actually, before we go into kind of how it comes into the admissions process for postgrad medicine,
mhm.
you want to run us through the formats? Like, how does it look? How do you
Yeah.
do this test?
Yeah, of course. So the CASPer is done online on your own device. It can be done from home. It's not like the GAMSAT where you have to go into a testing center and get it done. And it's done through the sort of acuity system, as you mentioned before, Tom. And in the CASPer, you've got around about 12 or so questions, we say roughly, and they require two types of responses. So text-based responses, and then you have video-based responses. So that means where you might get a scenario, and it could be in the form of a video or in the form of just a couple of words, like a paragraph of text. And we'll go through an example scenario later on today as well. And you basically have to either type out your response to those questions or you have to speak it out in a video form. And the CASPer is timed as well. So generally we say it's around about, so the video response questions are around about a minute or so long, usually when they're timed, and the text-based responses are around about 3 to 4 minutes in terms of how much time you have to write out
Yeah.
your responses to those.
All right. So then you've got written and video questions,
Yes.
and then you've also got written and video responses.
Responses, exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
cool.
Good variety.
So I think that kind of adds an interesting element to the whole process, because you're not just being judged on the words you type out, or even because you have the video component, they're also kind of judging you on your manner and how you come across
Yeah.
on the video, and everything plays into that, from the lighting to the words to your expression to your body language to your
Yes.
tone of voice. And yeah, interesting.
100%. 100%. Because as we know, communication is not just verbal communication. That's just one aspect, or written-based communication. There's so many things: non-verbal, your tonality, your vocabulary, and so all of that is considered CASPer.
Yeah, and we probably all experienced doctors who don't quite have that. Right? So I think this is a shift that they're making. The medical schools to kind of encourage more of that kind of ability, which is
Yes.
great.
100%, 100%. I've dealt with many doctors that don't exactly have the best nonverbal communication, so it's good that we're looking into that now. Yeah.
Cool. And so let's talk about actually. So then, we've touched on it. Let's go a bit deeper into what they are looking for in terms of your. It's not just about knowledge. What's it about?
So they're looking to essentially, what a marker will be looking at when they're marking the CASPer is thinking about, do it, or can I see this person being my own doctor? Would you, like, if you imagine yourself in the seat of the marker and you're looking at a video of a person doing the CASPer, you have to put yourself in the mindset of, is this a person I would actually trust as a doctor? Is this a person I would want to be my doctor or my medical professional? So that's the sort of thought process they have. And there's a couple of things that go into that thought process. And one of the most important, of course, are communication skills. Are you able to, and communication has lots of aspects to it. Are you able to communicate openly and clearly, concisely as well? Those are all things that they look for. And on top of that, they look for empathy as well. Empathy is very important. And are you able to, and it's really important to demarcate sympathy versus empathy. So sympathy is that feeling sorry for someone, but it's a little bit more superficial, whereas empathy is actually putting yourself in the shoes of that person and like really seeing what it's like to be in their position. So they're looking at your ability to do that, because that's very important. And within that comes this sort of ability to be compassionate and to show kindness to people. That's a big part of it. So that's another thing they look for. They're also looking for your critical thinking skills, so your ability to think quickly and appropriately in high pressure situations where, as we mentioned before, there's difficult scenarios that we're not really familiar with on a day-to-day basis. So testing your ability to deal with new things and difficult and sometimes uncomfortable and awkward situations is another thing they're looking for. So being able to think on your toes is another important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how about things like ethics and professionalism? I imagine that comes into it.
Yeah, those are very important components, 100%, and that's why they'll often give you ethical scenarios. And ethical scenarios are the ones that don't really have a very easy yes or no answer. There's often a grey area that you have to think a lot about. So 100% they're testing to see whether you're an ethical health professional, and that includes the pillars of bioethics, like your non-maleficence, beneficence, your justice and autonomy. So they're looking at those pillars as well of ethics. And then 100% professionalism. And that's why they'll give you scenarios in the workplace and in the context of you being a student or in the context of you being an actual health professional. And they want to test your ability to see whether you're able to fulfill the capacity of working as a professional in the workplace.
And that's interesting, because, I mean, isn't that something they teach in the actual medical school?
Yeah, 100% they do, which is interesting that they test it initially, but maybe they're looking to see, the level that someone is at, because there's some things that are just assumed that you may not be fully taught, and there are certain things that can't always be taught, which is like the manner of a person, their natural ability to interact with people, and I think that's what they're looking for, to see if this person is naturally has that personality of being professional and ethical. Well, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say that you don't have to be a fully formed doctor, but have a bit more of an understanding than someone who's just come out of high school. Because I guess this is postgraduate medicine. I think Curtin's the only undergraduate medical school that do it.
Yes.
There are a few other degrees like teaching that have started to use CASPer, but I mean, in those situations, we want someone to maybe not have like the whole gamut of the ability, but a certain amount of it that suggests that they can take it to the next level, that they can get there, right?
100%. Yeah. And that's why the CASPer is not like a theory-based assessment. They're not looking to see how much you know. And the questions are not like, there's no right or wrong answer per se. It's more just looking to see you as a person, getting to know you, the way you behave and what's important to you as a person. So that's really what it's all about.
Yeah. It kind of sounds like an interview.
Yeah, it does. It does seem a fair bit like it. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I've thought that for a little while, and my kind of sneaking suspicion is that if they can really hone this in, they probably can the interview down the track. Maybe not. I don't know. That's just my kind of prediction. But because it is so similar to an interview.
Very similar. Very similar. I would agree 100%. I feel because it tests the same things. The interviews are there to test for your communication skills, which is exactly what the CASPer is for. So I think eventually they might as well.
Yeah. I mean, the only real difference I see is that in the interview, in the MMIs, they're very kind of medical school, medicine focused.
Yeah.
Whereas here, they're a bit more general with the topics and things that they explore. So then how does CASPer fit into the admissions process?
Yeah. So it's very much a part of the admissions process along with, so for postgraduate medicine, as we know, the entry requirements are your undergraduate degree GPA. And so having a competitive GPA is very important. And then also performing well in the GAMSAT exam is very important. So there's those two parts. And then you have the CASPer. So the CASPer is another requirement on top of those two things.
Yeah, but not
And
for all the medical schools, right?
not for all, exactly. There's a few that don't require the CASPer, but there's certainly, like my university, University of Notre Dame, does require the CASPer. So there certainly are a few, and there's a lot more that are taking it on board. And so once you do those three, those are necessary in order to acquire an interview offer. Generally, for most of the unis that you require an interview, and then so once you get your interview offer, once you do the interview, then after that you have your final offer. So essentially, we're looking to guarantee a position in an interview. That's where it comes in the application.
Yeah, and so I've pulled up our med school summary page here. So I'll drop it in the show notes as well, so you can get this there. But I've pulled it up, and essentially it's a table that compares the admissions criteria for every single postgraduate medical school in the country. And I've just brought up Notre Dame and University of Wollongong are the big ones the only ones that do it. And so just to give you an indication of how significant CASPer is. So when you've done GAMSAT and you've done you got your GPA and you're applying for an interview at Notre Dame, and it's the same across Fremantle and Sydney. They look at your unweighted GAMSAT score. That's weighted as 30% of the ranking. Then you've got your weighted GPA, 30%, and then CASPer is 30%, and then the bonus is 10%. So essentially, CASPer is as important as your GAMSAT score and as your GPA. And you've spent 3 years working on your GPA. GAMSAT maybe that long as well, depending on the person. And then you got CASPer, so it's super important. That's just to get an interview. Then once the interview is over, and they're deciding who gets an offer, 50% of the ranking is your interview performance, and then the other 50% are those other factors, put together. So GAMSAT, GPA, CASPer, and bonus points, right? So it's really important to get the interview, and then after that, it also plays a smaller role, but still a significant role at Notre Dame. And over at Wollongong, it's even more important, where Wollongong have kind of changed their requirements, and we'll talk more about this in future podcasts when we talk about applications for this year. But as it stands at the moment, in 2025, so when you're going for an interview at Wollongong, so you need to have the minimum GPA, minimum GAMSAT score, which is a podcast episode in itself just to discuss that, debrief that whole thing. And then they look at 50. Then they rank you. 50% is your are the bonus points that Wollongong look at. And now I'm not going to go into all the bonus points because there's like 11 of them, and that's a whole other podcast. And then the other 50% is your CASPer score. And then they with your GAMSAT and GPA as qualifying hurdles. Yeah, I mentioned that already. So, and that's just to get the interview. And then once you've got the interview, which is an important step, then 70% of the weighting is your interview, and then 30% are the admissions bonuses. So they kind of get rid of CASPer at that point. But you still needed to get the interview. So really important. And
very important, a lot more important than people would think, I think, and know it's as important as a GPA, and even more perhaps important than the GPA and the GAMSAT is very important.
And so what are some of the kind of common misconceptions that you see about CASPer? We've kind of touched on some of them, but let's talk a bit more about that.
100%. I think one of the most common is of course, as you rightly went through, is people really don't understand fully the importance of it and how much it's weighted. So it's one of those things that are like, I'm going to focus on my GPA and the GAMSAT, and CASPer is just, I'm not going to study at all, and let's just see how it goes on the day. So definitely, that leads into the other misconception, which is that you don't really need to study for the CASPer, and you can't really study for the CASPer. Whereas we find that studying and preparation and guided preparation is essential to being able to succeed in the CASPer. And I'm speaking from experience myself. And, it's really important to practice the sorts of questions and to practice speaking out your responses and typing them out, because the CASPer can be a bit stressful. It's a timed exam. So being able to prepare in a timed setting is really important to ensure that you're not missing questions, to ensure that you get everything done to time as well. So that's another really big misconception, I'd say.
I think on that point, it might be easy to go, oh yeah, I know what I'd do in that situation.
Yes.
But can you actually articulate it to another person in a way that they understand and they can see you actually doing it, and see your thought processes where you weigh up all the different components of that situation, make a decision and explain your reasoning behind the decision? That's the skill there.
100%, 100%. That's a really important skill, exactly. And I'd probably say another important misconception is also like that idea of let's just be as empathetic as really nice as possible, or as that's people will not be able to see through that. But it's really important because the people that mark this, of course, are experienced. They know what they're doing, and they can read through things that are disingenuous, things that are sort of like superficial answers. So, saying I'm going to be as nice to this person as possible, and not really thinking critically and considering the stakeholders involved and both sides of the argument. So that's a really important misconception as well. It's not just about being nice, which is an important thing. It's also about weighing up, pros and cons, and thinking about things ethically as well.
Yeah, what I like about what you guys mentioned in our CASPA training program is that the overly heroic actions where people are like, I will get in there and I will save them. It's like, well, realistically, no, you probably shouldn't, because you probably make the situation worse. You're not trained for that, and it'll be just everyone will be in danger. And so, yeah, like you're saying, it's being overly kind of nice or almost like pretending that you would do these things that you really wouldn't, and you probably shouldn't. They're not realistic. And knowing what that is, and what's the difference between those situations and those responses. Yeah.
Exactly, 100%, 100%. Yeah, it's so important to note that, and to be aware that the markers will see through those sorts of things as well. And I would say probably a final misconception is that people also think that this is a time where I should tell the marker about my passion for medicine and really structure it. That's not the space to do that. The interviews still do exist, and that's really more of a domain where you will be showcasing that, so ensuring that you're actually answering the question, not talking about, going off on a tangent and talking about your passion for medicine, because that's something that students feel like, let me just push it in and force it into places.
It's something that your mum tells you, right? It's like, just be yourself, darling, and show them your passion for medicine.
Yes.
Great, but that's not what they're testing. Like,
No.
That's not what this is about.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
All right. And so then when doing the CASPA or preparing for it, what are some of the top challenges that you've seen students face?
Yes, 100%. I think I'm going off of what we were talking about before, and that is, making sure that you're answering the question that is asked, because sometimes, the question will ask, what are some of the key ethical issues in this situation? And one of the common errors that I've seen students do is that they will just start talking about what they would do in that scenario. So I would do this, 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 but the question was asking them, what were the issues here, not what you would do. That's probably the next question. So that's another sort of, that's a common mistake that students often make, is not really answering the question, or, answering the next question and repeating themselves again and again. So that's one common mistake that I see. Another common thing, and this is an issue that I encountered as well, was time management. And, the CASPer is timed, and it's
it is fast.
Very fast paced. And that's why, I find that, when I was filming the videos, I would take my sweet time with it. And when I was practicing, you tend to do that. So it's really important, going through the practices, you learn to speed up a little bit. And even fast typing, you have to type very quick. So learning things like touch typing was a really important skill for me as well, to deal with that. So that's
a modern skill. You kind of need to be able touch type.
Very
Especially for the GAMS, for the essay section. People often like, How much do I need to? Will I be able to write enough when I type? Like,
Yes,
people usually write more when they type
yes. When
than
they
when they handwrite. But yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So that's another common thing that I would say is managing time often becomes very difficult. And then I think finally, I think, an important thing is what we discussed before is the superficiality of answers. So giving a very like, oh, I would do this or not a very in-depth, honest answer is another common mistake that we see where students will say, I'm just going to write down what I think the marker wants to hear, as opposed to what I would genuinely do in this situation, which is something that's very easy to tell as a marker, but a very common mistake that is made.
right. And is there a correct, like a right answer for these things?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, there isn't a sort of right answer per se. It's such a subject, and that's the beauty of it. It's subjective. These are real life things. So there's not really a right answer per se, but we say as long as you're able to justify why you're doing what you're doing, as long as it's based upon ethical and professional and empathetic frameworks, then it should be an appropriate answer. So as long as you're able to justify why you're doing what you're doing, that's generally what we'd say is a right answer.
Yeah, and I think that on that point, like we've helped people through this over the years, and some people think they got a good answer. It's not about the right, but good answer, like a high quality answer. And then it's like, well, how about this, 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 and this, and this, and this, and like, oh wow, okay, I didn't consider that. And I think that this kind of plays into the understanding. Well, actually, we're going to talk about this in a second. A few tips on how to kind of approach CASPer, but the
Mhm.
important aspect is being able to discuss the complexity of the situation
Mhm.
and the different kind of factors involved. But what are some kind of tips for approaching your CASPer answers and your CASPer preparation?
Yes, 100%. I would say, of course, we've said this a few times, but of course, practicing is really important, and practicing scenarios like what we offering in our course at ThankFlip, as well as the practice questions, doing mock exams where you're not only practicing writing the questions, but also practicing to time. Because when you're practicing without time, you can spend hours crafting your answer, but in real life, you only have a couple of minutes. So first and foremost, practicing. And another sort of way to practice is, of course, filming yourself, sort of like what we're doing here, and watching your recording back. Because even when I film myself and I watch the recording back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. And I was looking up into the corner, or things like that you
Yeah.
don't notice.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of looking down at the screen like this, but not into the camera, and you're just getting a big
Exactly.
forehead shot, or maybe for me in this.
Exactly. It happens where like you're instead looking at yourself or the person, instead of like the camera's up here, but you're looking at yourself down here. So
We're
it's
just like staring into it, like
not
there's nuance to it. Yeah, and I mean, what's worked really well for our interview boot camp are these we call them mini mocks, where we get on a live group chat a couple times a week, and we kind of do practice with camera on and video, and you get immediate feedback from the team. And that's something that's really important for CASPer as well, which we're doing in our program, is having someone like Shabby or Emlan or Bhakti and someone else kind of being there live to give you that immediate feedback. Okay, you did good here, but we need to improve this, 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 and this, and you're on the right track, but let's make these changes. And so you're practicing that way and getting that immediate feedback is for the video components is the best way to do it. Like even like sending in videos and getting them reviewed. By the time you get them back, it's like hours or days, and it's like, oh, well, maybe I'll make that change. But if it's
yeah.
that immediate kind of feedback, it's fantastic.
100%. And to have that second party feedback from someone else, because if it's just you and it's a bit of an echo chamber where like, oh, it's okay, I did well. Because
Yeah.
it's good to have it from people that have seen many students. And for Armland Parkti and I, we've dealt with many students who've done the CASPer, so we know what good responses look like, as opposed to what sort of things to avoid. So definitely that.
And we're going to practice that in a second, which will be fun.
Yes, we will. Yes, definitely. And I think probably another tip I would also say is structure as well, very important. And we recommend this for interviews as well. So it's a similar thing, is being able to have some basic structure for your responses, and that you can build your own structure, what works for you. Well, we do have certain structures that we do recommend, like setting the scene and talking about what the ethical issues are before talking about the stakeholders involved, and then talking about what you would proactively tangibly do to deal with the situation, and then summarizing your answer. So having some form of an answer, or even a chronological answer, so you're not just randomly saying I'm going to do this and then
Yeah, and I think the key is having different, almost like different arrows in your
Yes.
quiver, depending on the scenario and
Yes.
whether it's written, whether it's spoken, depending on what you're seeing, to kind of help you to. And I think the key with the structures is that it really allows you to hit all the points that are being looked for. It stops you from rambling, stops you from going off track, stops you from missing the point completely. So it really kind of packages it up beautifully and presents it to the marker so that they go, whoa, tick, 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 tick. Fourth quartile answer. Actually, we haven't spoken about how it's scored.
Yes.
I just kind of remembered that. So can we just do a little segue now? Just quickly talk about how it's scored.
Yes.
We'll talk about some dates as well, and then we'll come back to the tips because they're very important.
100%, yeah. So in terms of the scoring, it's different from the way the GAMSAT is scored, which is like a raw score. We use quartiles in the CASPer. So in the name, quartiles, a quarter, it's broken up into 4 areas. So there's 4 quartiles, and the higher you go in the quartiles, the better you perform. So there's 4 quartiles. The lowest performing is the first quartile. The highest performing is the 4th quartile, which is where we want to be. And what it essentially means is that if you're in the highest quartile, the 4th quartile, you are in the top 25% of candidates. So the way it's marked is how you perform in relation to others. So that's a bit different. So the 4th quartile is when you're in the top 25%, and the bottom, or the first quartile, is when you're in the bottom 25%. So
and you need to be in the 4th quartile.
Yeah.
That's really, because you're competing with people who are performing at a high level. That's really what we're aiming for.
Exactly.
And in terms of the kind of the way that it's done and the way the scores are, like you receive the score, right?
Yeah.
You're given the score, and then it's sent to the university you're applying for automatically as well.
Yeah.
What's interesting, so they've got multiple dates from now until even after the applications close. I'm just looking at for this year. So we've got Notre Dame, Fremantle, and Sydney, plus Wollongong, domestic and international. They do CASPA. Let's focus on domestic. So they've got the March 20th, which is passed. April 30th, which will be passed by the time you guys listen to this. May 22nd is the next one you can do it. But the most popular one, I believe, will be June 5th, which is after the GEMSAS applications close. And then you can still do it then, and then that's going to be sent away to the university. But the thing is, you can't redo it, right? If you can't go, what if I do the one on the 22nd, and then if I don't get the score I want, I'll do it again on June the 5th? It doesn't work that way. You can only do it once per cycle.
Yeah, there you go. So there's quite a few sittings, which is different from, the GAMSAT or other tests where it's very set in terms of when you have to sit it. So you do have the freedom to choose when works for you. And some students like to get it over and done with. Other students, as you mentioned, will prefer to do, the later on sittings when they've got a bit more time to prepare. So it's good you have a bit more freedom to choose. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's go back to the tips.
Yes, absolutely. So another tip that I would recommend and that we've spoken about is the idea of waffling. So I mean, I love to eat waffles, but I'm sure you do too. But when we talk about waffling, what do we mean by that? But that's really where you're sort of filling up the gaps with lots of words and a lot of unnecessary information. And because psychologically it feels better when we've got a paragraph of information as opposed to a couple of sentences. But it's really important that communication and the ability to communicate, a big part of that is also conciseness and being clear. And that means, leaving out the things that are unnecessary. And that comes with practice, but it's a skill to be able to decipher what really is relevant in my answer, in either my video-based answer or my text-based answer. Being able to think through that is really important, and knowing, what are the important points? What are some things I can leave out here that are a bit unnecessary? So being aware of a waffle is very important, I think, as well.
Yeah. And how about handling some of those more sticky questions with the ethical dilemmas and things?
Yes.
Any kind of tips on that?
Those ones are the hard ones, 100%, and they're meant to be. That's why they're given to us. The CASPA is not meant to be, an easy breezy, test. It's meant to put you in those difficult situations. So I think it's really important to, again, realize that there's not really a right or wrong answer in these things. Whatever you're talking about in your ethical answers, you need to be able to justify why you're doing what you're doing, and also using principles like, we have the pillars of bioethics, using principles like justice and fairness, equality, thinking about those real life ethical principles, and maybe even picking an ethical framework. If you're familiar with things, the one that I tend to go with is utilitarianism, so the greatest good for the greatest number of people, or you might like to approach things in a different way. But, as long as, no matter what way you approach it, essentially, as long as you're justifying it and coming back to those principles of empathy and fairness and those sorts of things, I think is the main way I would say to approach those.
Great. Any other tips?
Any other tips? I'd probably say I think those are the main ones. I think, very importantly, making sure that you're getting feedback from someone else, and practicing with other people is what I would recommend. Like when I was practicing for the CASPA, I had, a group of people that I was able to practice with, and we were able to bounce ideas off of each other. So that's something that I would definitely recommend. And of course, just making sure that you're, doing productive preparation for the CASPA. So really setting time aside in your week, in your day, to sit down and go through these scenarios is really important as
All
well.
right. Well, let's practice one of these, right?
Yes, let's go for it.
All right. So we've got a scenario here with an answer. So Shabby, do you want to read it out?
Yes, I would love to. So this
So,
scenario.
so before we begin, for you guys listening, I want you to listen to the scenario, pause this, give it a go yourself, then unpause it and listen to our answer. All right, and see how you go.
Okay. All right. Make sure you're ready with those pause buttons. Okay. All right. So the scenario is a city council is introducing a policy that mandates COVID-19 vaccination for all public school teachers. Some members of the community claim this infringes on individual freedoms. The question is, how would you approach a conversation with a teacher who is strongly opposed to the mandate?
All right, so pause, give it a go, speak it out loud. That's the key, not just like, oh yeah, I'll think about it. Speak it out loud. Hopefully you're somewhere where you can speak out loud. If not, just speak it in your own head and then come back to it. All right, welcome back. Here is my answer. I understand that you have concerns, but the council has made its decision based on public health advice. As a teacher, it's part of your responsibility to comply with these requirements. Personal views aside, the focus needs to be on ensuring a safe environment for students and staff. Non-compliance could have consequences for your position. What do you think of that answer, Shabby?
Oh, what do you guys think? Do you think that's a high scoring answer, or do we think it's a bit low scoring? I think it was a solid effort, Tom. I think there are.
Now, would you guys have said something similar to that, something different, some similar points? Were you different in terms of your structure or how you did it? Have a think about that.
I would probably say that this is surprisingly one of the more lower scoring answers. And there you might have noticed a couple of things that Tom was missing in his answer. So first and foremost, so the question was, how would you approach a conversation with a teacher who is strongly opposed to the mandate? So now what Tom mentioned in his answer is that we jumped straight into what we would say. So we jump straight into, I understand that you have concerns, but the council has, and so on and so forth. But really the way to answer a question like this, and the question will be, what would you do or how would you approach this, is to first set the scene. So to say, I would begin the conversation by acknowledging the teacher's concerns, or importantly, start off by saying, I would first begin by speaking with the teacher in a private setting, because that's really important. You don't want to be having a conversation with someone in a shopping mall, in a classroom where there's other people hearing this, particularly when it's sensitive things like personal views about vaccine mandates and things like that. So it's really important that you set the scene first. I would speak with the teacher in a private setting, and I would start by initially acknowledging their feelings and then validating that it's understandable to have certain reservations about, health issues, like, for example, COVID-19. So it's really important that you don't rush into what you say, because in Tom's answer, we said things like, it's part of your responsibility to comply with these requirements. The focus needs to be on insurance. So it seems like we're cornering this person, we're confronting them, and that's not really an appropriate way to communicate with someone. Because imagine if you were the teacher, you would feel attacked. You you would feel like, this person is really not seeing my point of view at all here. What's even the point of me having this conversation with this person when they're approaching me in this way? And you can see people don't respond very well to, being confronted. So it's really important that you make them feel comfortable, where you say, I understand where you're coming from, and you have every full right to feel concerned and to have reservations. So that's a really important thing to mention. And that's something the CASPer markers are looking for. Is this person able to acknowledge other people's opinions? Because in the medical field, you will come across people with all sorts of opinions and thoughts that obviously may not match with yours, but you don't start shouting at them and confronting them.
Posting online about them, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's how I would begin with my answer. And then we'd probably say, next we might emphasize the importance of community health and the protection of vulnerable populations. So little ones, children are very vulnerable. So it's really important to mention populations like immunocompromised children, for example, and to talk about things that may be emotionally relevant to the teacher again, and to think about, why is this teacher reserved about, this particular mandate? There could be certain, valid reasons they have. They might say that, I had this situation in the past where this happened to a child, or I saw this research that said this, and that gives you the opportunity to address that. So you might say, okay, well, if you saw this research that said this, let's go through it together. Let's try and unpack it and understand it. You're still acknowledging their reservations and trying to understand where those sentiments come from. So that's really important. Then you might say, if appropriate, I might offer to connect them with trusted medical resources for further clarification. So you might not have all the answers, and you're not expected to. It's really important to be able to connect people with the right resources as well. So finally, I would say my aim would not be to pressure, but to inform and build mutual understanding. So we really want to make it clear to the marker, to the person who's watching you or reading your answers, that my goal isn't to corner this person or to force a resolution immediately. It's to approach a sense of mutual understanding and to build a discussion point as well. So a couple of things that I mentioned.
Amazing. Yeah, totally. And I mean, you were kind of explaining it as you went, but essentially you've got to give that answer usually in under 60 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, cool. All right. And so then we've covered a lot today. And with some sample question there and all the different tips and things. But then if you want more help, let's take you behind the scenes on our CASPA training program, which we are releasing any day now. By the time you guys see this, it's probably going to be released. So we built it because as you can see, the CASPA is really important. It's under appreciated in terms of its importance and the complexity of it. And people have been struggling in terms of getting their skills to the level that it needs to be, and also making sure that they're confidently able to do it on the day in the time that they have, and it's fast. So we've built it to be a really step-by-step system and not just, sample questions and tips. And so, Shabby, do you want to kind of run us through what is in the program and kind of how it
Yes.
works?
I would love to, and we've worked very hard with both Tom. We've had lovely Armland and Parkti as part of the team who have worked so hard on creating these resources, and we haven't just popped these out of nowhere. This has come through years of experience in the CASPA teaching space, and based on our experiences of the questions that we had, as well as the answers we gave to receive our fourth quartile scores as well. So all of the people who have created this course did receive scores in the highest quartiles. So just so that you know that. And there's a number of really key resources that we have created as part of this program. So we have a full-length question bank to start off with questions around about 50 or so CASPA questions, all with worked examples as well, so you know what a high-performing answer will be. And these are things and resources and questions you can use to practice, which is really one of the key tips we had throughout this podcast is practice, practice, practice. On top of those, the question bank itself, we also have our mock exams, so full-length mock exams, a whole CASPA test, which does include things like video-based responses that you can construct, as well as text-based responses. And we also have worked examples for those as well. So these are, really good tools that you can use and do to time as well, which is what we recommend. We also have built a number of video resources as well. Amlan and I and Parkti, we had a lot of fun with these. So you can watch us going through a number of tips and tricks. We go through how the CASPer is marked, example questions. We go through what the CASPer is, the timing of the exam. Really everything you need to know about the GAMSAT is covered in this video content.
Yeah, and just more specifically on that, because it was really, what's really important about those training videos is that you guys, you and Amlan teach us how to structure the answers, how to do it within the time conditions. You give us strategies and techniques to implement. So, it's not just tips, but it's actual methodologies that we then do practice on. Because once you've completed those videos, we then do those live sessions. Like I said, those live mini mock sessions where you practice and you get feedback, immediate feedback to make sure that you're on the right track with that.
Definitely, and it's a program that contains everything and anything you need for the CASPA. If I had this when I was preparing for the CASPA, I would have done, it would have just been so much more easier for me as well. I would say that I would have gotten an even higher quartile, but it was
Yeah, you're already going to the fourth quartile, so maybe you would have gotten there quicker. Yeah, so it combines video lessons with questions bank, with mock exams, with live group training, and we do it group on purpose because you learn from other people things that you would never have considered. You get from hearing other people's answers and the feedback to their answers. So it takes your preparation much further. And so the program is for people who want to get into Notre Dame and Wollongong and potentially Curtin if you're looking at undergrad. It's for you if you have no idea what to say. You're like, well, I wouldn't know what to even do in those situations. Or maybe you kind of know, but it's not where it needs to be. Or maybe you want to be able to kind of package and present your thoughts in a more succinct and impactful way to hit the marks. And essentially to help you maximize your result on CASPA, which is as important as your GAMSAT score and your GPA for those medical schools. So yeah, if you want to join, head on over to the show notes. We'll have a link to the CASPA program there. But thank you, Shabby, for running us through that. This has been great.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom. It was so exciting to chat about the CASPA.
Yeah, excellent. And so, if you guys have any questions, head on over to our Facebook group called Nurses Doing GAMSAT, which is the same as this podcast. But go to the show notes if you want the resources. We talked about the med school summary, where it kind of has all the medical schools side by side and their application requirements. We'll have a link to the CASPA program in there as well. The show notes, you can go to the link in the description, or go to thankflipgamsat.com/episode 16. But thank you, Shabby. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Good luck with all your prep. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, I have a cool gift for you, just for listening to the Nurses Doing GAMSAT podcast. We do some of our best work in our Facebook group called, you guessed it, Nurses Doing GAMSAT. It's free to join, and every day we're sharing actionable guides, tips and tricks, and really just how to smash the exam and get into medicine. You can join today by searching Nurses Doing GAMSAT on Facebook. Thanks for listening to another episode, and I'll see you next time.